Okay, now what to do if you find you've done, several hours of knitting and you've got a mistake all the way down here, and you can't live with it. And you might find that you can, and you just keep going. But if you can't live with it, the saddest thing you will ever have to do is take your needles off and unpick. So basically, you just keep pulling on the yarn, and each of your stitches will just unravel. So there we have back to the stocking stitch. Don't go right to the end, just, Then what you do is you get your needle and you just insert it through all of those stitches until you get them all on there. And then the last couple you do one stitch at a time. And I've got one too many. So basically you just finished on a purl row. So we just purl that stitch, and there you are, you're back to where you were with your nice neat stocking stitch. And you just start knitting again. Depending on how you've picked up the stitches, you may have to knit into the back. Basically, when you're knitting normally, your stitches will present that way. When you've picked them up like I do, the stitches are presenting that way. Basically what you want is the right hand side of the stitch at the front and the left hand side of the stitch at the back. Occasionally you will come across a situation where you've got the right hand side of the stitch at the back and the left hand at the front. You can either knit through the back and then it lines up and looks tidy, or you can switch it around before you knit it. And to do that, you just go from the back and turn it around, and go from the back and turn it around. Either method will do. I tend to knit into the back of the stitch because it's faster for me, but whichever method you are most comfortable with. And be careful when you're picking up stitches, because as you can see here, it's really easy to split the wool. And if you split the wool, it could possibly end up in you having two stitches where there was one. I'll just see if I can show you. So like, let's split the wool and you knit that one, then you knit that one, and you've got two stitches where you should only have one. So I'm just going to unpick that and do it again. Okay. Alright, there we are. And you're off and running. The other way to unpick, if you find that there's an error that is not too far down, you can frog. Basically what that means is that you undo one stitch at a time. To do that, I usually hold the tail of the wool in my fingers like that, so there's a bit of tension on it. You go into the loop in the stitch underneath. So there's the current stitch, here's the stitch underneath. So you slip your needle in there, pull, and give the yarn a little bit of a tug, and it just undoes the stitch. Like that. And it works the same way whether you're looking at the front or the wrong, like the good side or the wrong side of the fabric. you just slip the needle in underneath. You fix the error when you get to it, whatever that may be. Like, for example, let's say I dropped that stitch, so I've frogged back to it. I pick it up again and then re-knit the stitch in the row below, and then I'm back to knitting. And there we are. Another common error that I have seen is when you're knitting away merrily, and I don't know if I can do it on purpose actually, you don't actually complete the stitch properly. So you might do that and then pull it off somehow. So let's just finish the row. I've got 2 errors there that we can look at. The only time really that I do these kind of errors is when I'm working on very, very fine lace. But for beginners, it's actually quite common. So we'll just keep going until we get to the next row. Okay. Now, so far, it's not a huge drama. What you can do is you knit up to the error. Okay, nearly there. Okay, now here's the error here. And there's 2 of them because I'm going to show you how to fix the first one. Basically what you do is you separate the 2. This is the original stitch. This is the yarn you wrapped around the needle but didn't actually pull through it. So you just pick it up with the right hand tip of your needle and pass that over, and there you have the fixed stitch. Okay, and now I'll show you what happens if you don't fix it or you don't notice, and you knit that one and then you knit that one and then you knit that one. Okay, so there we are. We didn't notice the error and we just knitted it. And if you have a look here, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 2, 4, 6. And if you remember, we started with 25 stitches, now we've got 26. So we'll just do one more row so that I can show you what it looks like. Okay, let's have a look. So there's your fabric over here, still nice, neat, straight lines of stitches. But here you've actually got a hole, and you've got a stitch there that doesn't have any other stitches underneath it. Again, to fix that one, you can either frog back to it, or you can take your needles off and unpick. It depends on how long ago you made the error. But if you're going to frog it back, you need to do that whole row I've just done and then back to this stitch. So let's have a look at that. So you frog it by inserting the needle into the stitch below, giving the yarn a gentle tug, doing one stitch at a time, which is not a problem when you've only got 25, 26 stitches on the needle, but when you get more experienced and more advanced, for example, if you decide to do a baby shawl or an evening wrap, you might have, 150, 300 stitches on your needle. But it's probably going to be the type of knitting that you don't particularly want to unpick by taking your needles off. I have had experience trying to unpick mohair, for example, which is quite frankly a nightmare. So it's better if you can to try and avoid making mistakes, even if that means going a lot slower than you want to, and paying more attention to what you're doing than you're perhaps comfortable with. These days, when I'm knitting, I can knit as I walk. I quite frequently knit, used to knit on the way to work. I have been known to knit on an exercise bike even, because I am now so comfortable with knitting that I don't need to pay a lot of attention to it, but when you're just starting out, you do. So I'm back to the error, and I unpicked the stitch on the wrap over, and I've unpicked the stitches before it. Basically, like I did with that other stitch, to fix it, you pick up the original stitch and you lift it over the yarn wrap and then knit to the end. So here I've been knitting along merrily, and then I realise just before I turn, or when I turn, that oops, I've got a drop stitch, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4 rows ago. So how am I going to fix that? Well, first what I need to do is I need to divide the stitches onto the two needles so that I'm at the point where I actually drop the stitch. So there it is there. As you can see, it's gone down quite a few rows. Now I could use my needles to fix this, but probably the easier way of doing it for anyone who's new to knitting is to get yourself a crochet hook. Now you may not crochet, but every knitter should have one or two of these for fixing this kind of error. Now, the hook that I've pulled out is a 4mm, but it doesn't really matter what the size is as long as it's big enough to hook your yarn. You insert the hook into the stitch that you've still got. You put the hook behind the first rung on your ladder, and this is your ladder here, the yarn for each row, and you pull it through to form the stitch. You do it again, put it behind the ladder, rung on the ladder, and pull it through to form the stitch. And again, put it behind the rung on your ladder, and you pull the yarn through to form your stitch. And then you just slip it back onto your needle. A stocking stitch is reasonably easy like that because it's all facing the same way. Garter stitch is a little bit trickier. And I'll see if I can show you by doing the same thing again and dropping another stitch. And I'm going to pretend that this is garter stitch. So take it down one more. So the first stitch, you pick up the last complete stitch that you've got, and you pick up the first rung on your ladder and pull it through. Then you've got to take the crochet hook behind, pick up the stitch again, take it through behind your ladder, hook the ladder through. Then you do the next one as you normally would. So you take the hook behind the rung and pull it through, and then again you've got to go from behind, pick up the stitch again, take your hook and the stitch behind, hook the wool and bring it through. And there you have garter stitch. Okay, and you're done. So that's just a couple of the types of errors that you might come across as you're learning to knit.